Hi, I'm Marc, and welcome to the weekly Outside Views report on the politics of the European Union, the EU. And today I want to talk about another aspect of the EU fishery policy. Because the European Union this week published 4 ambitious proposals for the next meeting of the Indian Ocean Tuna Commission, the IOTC, which will take place in May. The aim is to improve the conservation and management of tuna stocks. According to the IOTC Scientific Committee, current stock levels and catches in the Indian Ocean are unsustainable. Along with the new proposals, the EU has also objected to IOTC Resolution 2302 on the use of floating fish aggregating devices, or FADs. At the next IOTC annual meeting, the EU will push for the adoption of the following proposals. The first is a proposal for multi-annual tropical tuna management to improve the management of the 3 species of tropical tuna, that's yellowfin, big eye, and skipjack tuna. According to the IOTC Scientific Committee, current stock levels and catches in the Indian Ocean are unsustainable. This plan for the different species would run for 3 years and would reduce catches in line with scientific advice. Plans for several species have already been adopted and successfully implemented by other regional fisheries management organizations, but this would be the first time the IOTC has done so. The EU proposes a proportional catch reduction taking into account both the current catch levels of each IOTC member and their level of development, just to ensure fair treatment of developing countries. And second, they proposed rules for inspections on board ships on the high seas. Inspection of fishing vessels on the high seas is one of the most important and efficient tools to ensure compliance with IOTC regulation and, most importantly, to combat illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing activities. So-called IUU fishing poses the greatest threat to sustainable resource management and the marine ecosystem. The EU hopes to build on the initial talks that started in 2022, in which most IOTC members expressed their support for the proposal. And third, we have a proposal for an update of the IOTC Compliance Committee rules to improve the compliance process and ensure that fishing activities are conducted in accordance with applicable laws, regulations, and conservation measures. The Compliance Committee is the body that oversees the implementation of existing regulations and obligations by the IOTC members. Compliance has been a weakness of the IOTC, and this proposal identifies and addresses the areas of non-compliance. In addition, the coastal developing countries are to be supported in better monitoring their fleets, ports, and also waters. And fourth, there's a proposal for a new resolution on the use of floating fish aggregating devices, the FADs, to replace the old resolution adopted at the IOTC special session in February. With this, the EU wants to improve the obligations that are technically difficult to implement, clarify unclear provisions, and bring the wording into line with the scientific opinions. The proposal addresses all relevant aspects of fishing with floating fish aggregating gear, from identification to tackling plastic pollution and limiting the number of fish aggregating devices. At the same time, the least clear provisions of Resolution 2302 will be improved to ensure their effective implementation. The EU has decided not only to propose an improvement to fish aggregating devices, but also to object to IOTC Resolution 2302. At the IOTC special session on fish aggregating devices in February 23, the resolution on the management of floating fish aggregating devices was adopted by a majority against the votes of IOTC members fishing with floating fish aggregating devices. As a result, many IOTC members have objected to this resolution, including the EU, Comoros, Oman, Kenya, Seychelles, and the Philippines. The EU believes that IOTC members should behave cooperatively and that every effort should be made to reach consensus. Conservation measures should not include provisions that are unworkable or unclear. It is also important that management decisions in RFMOs are backed up by scientific advice. The countries that have objected are not bound by this resolution and do not have to implement all the provisions of this resolution. The Indian Ocean Tuna Commission, the IOTC, is the regional fisheries organization, the RFMO, tasked with the management of tuna and tuna-like species in the Indian Ocean and adjacent seas. It was established in 1993 and the agreement establishing it entered into force in 1996. The IOTC is an intergovernmental organization representing the Indian Ocean riparian states and countries with an interest in tuna fishing in the area. Its objectives are to promote cooperation between its members, to conserve and make optimal use of the tuna stocks in the area, and to ensure the development of sustainable fisheries in the region. To achieve these goals, the IOTC members meet annually and discuss and decide on measures for the conservation and management of tuna and related species. The EU joined the IOTC in 1995. The other IOTC members are Australia, Bangladesh, China, Eritrea, France on behalf of its overseas territories, India, Indonesia, Iran, Japan, Yemen, Kenya, Comoros, Korea, Madagascar, Malaysia, Maldives, Mauritius, Mozambique, Oman, Pakistan, Philippines, Seychelles, Somalia, Sri Lanka, South Africa, Sudan, Tanzania, Thailand, and the United Kingdom. There are a few more questions that might make this topic a little bit clearer. What kind of organization is this IOTC? And what is the EU proposing for the next meeting in May? I had it in a long version already. The IOTC is, as I said, the regional fisheries organization tasked with the management of tuna and tuna-like species in the Indian Ocean and adjacent seas. Established in 1993 by a kind of an agreement, and the IOTC is an intergovernmental organization representing the Indian Ocean riparian states and the countries with an interest in tuna fishing in this area. And the important part, I can't stress often enough, is to promote cooperation between its members and especially conservation of the tuna stocks in the area and to ensure the development of sustainable fisheries. To achieve the goals, as I said, they meet at least once a year and discuss and decide on measures, but they didn't do it very properly recently. That's why I had to make this video about the new proposals. In addition, special meetings are convened on specific topics, such as, for example, the February 23 meeting on the fish aggregating devices, those FADs. At the forthcoming IOTC annual meeting in May, the EU will present the four proposals I explained earlier in this video for the conservation and management of tuna stocks. Along with these new proposals, the EU will also submit objections for this resolution with the floating aggregating devices, and that is quite a discussion there. But what are floating fish aggregating devices, or FADs? FADs are devices designed to attract tuna and or other fish and are used to facilitate their catch. Because fish instinctively congregate under objects floating in the sea, and that's why FADs use this behavior to catch more specimens of each species. FADs can be built in different ways, but essentially consists of a float and an underwater device. An FAD can float freely and be tracked using a satellite buoy, or it can be anchored to the seabed. How they are used depends on the needs of each fishing fleet. Purseine vessels tend to use floating FADs on the high seas, while coastal communities tend to use anchored FADs that are closer to shore. Why are fish collecting devices used at all? Fish aggregating devices have significant benefits and are used in many fishing activities. They can be used to catch more specimens of certain species because they congregate underneath. The use of fish aggregating equipment reduces the effort required, so catching fish requires less time at sea and less fuel. For example, without fish aggregating gear, Purseine vessels, which catch large numbers per trip, would spend more time at sea in search of large schools of tuna, resulting in longer, fuel-intensive trips with no guarantee of success. And therefore, the use of fish aggregating devices has clear advantages when it comes to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and the cost of fishing activities. Why is the EU defending the use of fish aggregating devices despite their environmental impact? The EU believes that the use of fish aggregating gear should not be overly restricted compared to other fishing methods that have a similar impact, but that their impact on the environment should be kept to a minimum, as they put it. Therefore, with their proposal to the IOTC, the EU wants to reduce the impact of floating fish collecting devices, in particular their impact on fish stocks, but also on the ecosystem and their contribution to marine litter. The proposed measures are aimed at starting the use of biodegradable fish aggregators, reducing the number of aggregators lost, and even limiting the number of aggregators used. If adopted, this proposal should be an important step towards improving the sustainability of fishing activities using floating fish aggregating gear, which should be the management objective for all fishing gear. But why is the EU allowing the use of fish aggregating devices despite the pollution in the sea? The EU proposes increasing the use of biodegradable materials, as I said, in the manufacture of floating fish aggregating equipment, but also in the use. And for example, the biodegradability of fish aggregating devices should gradually increase, and the use of the most polluting models should be banned. From 27, fish aggregating equipment used in the Indian Ocean will be fully biodegradable, thanks to the development of new technologies. In the meantime, the measures the EU is proposing to the IOTC for adoption at the annual meeting aim to reduce the loss of fish aggregating gear and reduce the contribution to marine pollution. If the proposal is accepted, the number of buoys issued or purchased must be reduced. Floating fish aggregating devices must be marked, and lost buoys must be reported even. But why isn't the EU proposing to reduce the number of floating fish aggregating devices? The EU proposes gradually reducing the number of fish collecting devices used from 300 to 240 per ship. Never before has such a significant reduction in the number of fish aggregating devices that can be used been agreed for of one of the world's oceans. In its management objectives, the EU takes into account the need to gradually adapt all fleets. It also addresses any overly negative impacts of a low maximum number of fish aggregating gears, which would result in higher greenhouse gas emissions and challenge fleet efficiency. However, fish aggregating devices make a significant contribution to the efficiency of fishing activities by reducing the time at sea that the fleet spend searching for fishing grounds, and thereby also reducing fuel consumptions and CO2 emissions. There's two important aspects of the environmental impact of fishing activities on the environment. But it's very complicated, and that's why the video got quite long. But it's a topic we always talk about: fisheries policies in the North Sea, or at the UK coast since Brexit a lot, in Norway, but also in the Mediterranean, but not in other places in the world where the EU is involved as well. And that's why I decided to make this video today, because of the current discussions going on and the current press releases of the EU on this topic. And so I know it's not a mass viewer public topic, but I thought it's an important one. And with a change structure now, I can go a little bit more into depth of a topic than just the overview. In time, I will just compare how the videos with a lot of short news have worked, how the ones with the deeper topic magazines have worked, and then we will see how it will continue. But for the time being, I will choose one bigger topic of the area that is due on the day of publishing, and have a look at that a little bit more closely. And if you want to see another report after this long one, the next one is right here in the end screen, and I'll see you there. I'll be back.